Good evening and welcome to the live broadcast and or video of the public education session dedicated to helping you understand the city revenue sources that allow us as a city to operate both from an operations and capital standpoint. Lori Sullivan has put together an incredible amount of information in a stunning and riveting format for you. So grab your popcorn and, enjoy the information that is being provided to you, for you, and on behalf of all of those who work from the department side and the staff side to provide the services to our city. I know that they also appreciate you understanding where this money comes from that pays for everything that we expect to see on a daily basis. So with that, the format is going to be more presentation in style. We do have a few people that have joined us here tonight, and we'll open up for some questions if they do have some. If you have questions after viewing this either online, live tonight or recorded, please feel free to reach out either to the mayor or to a member of council via email, and they can get you more information, or directly to Lori. So with that, thank you very much.
Thanks, Lou. So tonight we're going to talk about the revenue sources for the city. And first we're going to go over the revenues that the city uses for their operating expenses. The main source of income or revenue for the city is taxes. Property taxes is the largest source of revenue, but there are others. We also have state aids, permits and licenses, and other miscellaneous revenues like utility pilots and interest income. Now, the other side of the spendings for the city is capital. So for capital, we do use some property taxes. As a matter of fact, we use about $2.3 million worth of our property taxes for capital. But we have about $7 million of capital projects that need to be funded each year. So we have to find additional revenue sources for that. Those include impact fees, general obligation debt, applying some of the city's fund balance, and a great deal comes from donations and grants. So we're going to start with the city operating revenues and just kind of follow along from there. When the city starts putting its budget together, it's very similar to you at home when you're putting together a budget. First, you have to look at what revenues do you have and what expenses do you have and sort of match them up. The city's the same way. We have different revenues that can be used for different things and the operating, capital, debt, and maintenance expenses that we have. When the city, just like at home, when you look at your budgets, the first thing we have to do is look at our revenues. We spend a lot of time talking about expenses and what does the city spend money on, but when we budget, the first thing we have to look at is what are our revenue sources, what revenues are available to us. Excuse me. Our revenue mix comes with its challenges. Every different type of revenue that we have has its own constraints or rules. So we're going to go through those a little bit. As I said, property taxes being our largest revenue source, there's property tax limits put on that by the state. Aids from the state is another source of our revenue, but they've been stagnant for many years, so we'll take a look at that as well. Then inflationary increases in expenses and the capital needs all squeeze the revenue that we have and makes it a real balancing act to try to get it all together and make sure we're getting everything that the people need. So when I talk about the constraints on revenue sources, we'll go through just a few quick. So like on the levy, we use that for everything, operating, capital, and debt. But the amount of the levy is limited by net new construction, and that's a rule from the state. We also have service fees that can be used for operating or capital, but anytime the city puts a new fee out there, we have to have an equal downward adjustment to the levy limit, so no revenue gain. Impact fees, we use impact fees for capital projects and for debt. They can only be used actually for capital, not operating. Impact fees is a fee on new development in the city to help pay their share of infrastructure that's necessary because they're here, like new streets or new parks or law enforcement. Also grants. Grants usually aren't for operating, but they are for capital, but they're always restricted by a grant agreement and usually require some sort of matching funds. And then debt. Debt is never used for operating expenses and can only be used for capital projects that have a lifespan of at least 10 years. So we'll continue to talk about those as we go along. Oh, as I said, it's a real balancing act. The city council spends a lot of time at the budget trying to make sure that we have the revenue sources available for the operating and capital needs of this city. So, as I said, with the biggest revenue source being property taxes, a lot of people talk about property assessments and property taxes in the same sentences. So we're going to talk about each one of those separately just a little bit. First of all, we're going to talk about how do assessments work, and does a change in your assessment change the amount of revenue that the city gets, and what is your assessment based on? Then we'll talk about how the city sets the property tax levy, the state constraints, how it affects the budget and the taxpayers. So start with assessments. First of all, the answer to that first question is assessments do not increase or decrease the amount of the tax levy. It increases or decreases the total value of the property in the city, which in turn changes the tax rate or mill rate. What we do, how you get a mill rate, is you take the amount of the tax levy and you divide it by the total value of the city, and that gives you a mill rate. So if the value of the city is higher and the tax levy divided by that, the mill rate will be lower. If the assessments are lower and it's the same taxes, then the mill rate is higher. And we'll take a look at how that works here too. So another question is, what is your assessment based on? A lot of people don't know that your 2023 assessment is really based on sales from 2022. So it's kind of a lagging index, okay? So if property was sold in 2022, it's those sales values that are looked at for the 2023 assessments. Other things that change your assessment is the location of your house, the age, the style, the square footage, the condition, those kinds of things. I borrowed a little video here from the city of Kitchener, which I think describes how property taxation and assessment works. It's 3 minutes, and I'm going to take a look at it real quick.
I want to explain to you how assessment and taxation work. Let's start off by creating a small town with only 3 houses. Each house is different and has a different value. The first house has a market value of $200,000. The second house has a value of $250,000. The third house is valued at $350,000. The city supplies services, and the money to pay for these services is recovered through property taxation. Let's imagine that the town needs to collect $1,200 to pay for these services. To calculate the tax rate, you divide the cost to provide services by the total assessed value of all the properties in the town. This establishes a tax rate. Now, to calculate how much tax each home pays, we multiply the tax rate by the assessment. As you can see, the first house would pay $300, the second home would pay $375, and the highest valued home would pay $525. Let's summarize what we've covered so far. 1. Assessment places a market value on each property. 2. The total assessment is used to calculate the tax rate. And 3. Taxes pay for the cost of city services, like roads, fire protection, snow removal, parks, etc. Let's imagine that another year has passed and that property values have increased by 4%. Now, let's imagine that the cost of providing services has remained the same, $1,200. The tax rate is the cost of services divided by the total assessment. The result is that all owners still pay the same tax as before because the cost of services has not changed. Let's summarize what we've covered so far. 1. Assessment increase does not necessarily mean more taxes are collected. 2. If all assessments go up equally, everyone pays the same as long as the cost of services stays the same. Now, let's imagine another year passed and values did not increase at the same rate. Home 1 remained at the same value, $208,000. Home 2 increased by 1%, $262,600. And Home 3 increased 3%, $374,920. The cost of services stayed the same at $1,200. Here's the math. $1,200 divided by the new assessment total equals the new tax rate. The net effect of the new values sees House 1 paying less tax and the house that went up 3% paying a higher proportionate share. If all assessments do not go up equally, there's a redistribution of the tax. However, the total tax collected remains the same. What happens if the cost of services goes up? Let's do the math. Services now cost $1,400. The result is a different tax rate. As you can see, an increase in service cost results in a tax increase. But suppose that the cost of services went up, but also one more home was now built in the town and it was worth $300,000. The new total assessment is now $1,145,520. This results in a new tax rate. The new house now helps pay for the cost of services, and the result is that everyone pays less. This is a hypothetical representation of how the process works. The key points are: 1. Total assessment value is used to calculate tax rates. 2. An increase in property value does not always mean an increase in taxes. 3. New construction helps pay the overall tax burden. 4. Taxes are based on the cost of providing services that citizens want and need. And that explains how assessment and taxation work.
I think that's a good explanation or a good overview in a simplified form so that people can kind of understand how that works, because a lot of people, the city has been working with full value assessments for the last couple of years. So homes are assessed every year here. So when the market goes up, the value of the homes go up throughout the city. Like last year, our average increase was just over 11%. We're going to look at how that looks on a tax bill compared to 2022 to 2023 tax bill. So let's move on here and talk about property tax levy. So levy, that's the amount of money that the city needs to operate that is going to put onto the tax roll. The state of Wisconsin restricts levy, the addition of levy, to 0%. So basically the state says you cannot raise taxes at all unless you have a few of these things on here. So it's 0% or a percentage of growth in your city. So the state says if you're going to grow, you're going to need additional funds for services, and that additional growth is going to help pay for those additional services because it's going to spread that cost over a greater assessment or value of the city. So it's 0% or percent of growth, which is called net new construction. The only other reasons why the city could increase its levy is, number one, we're allowed to pay for our debt service. So our debt service costs are on the levy. So if there's any increase in that, it would increase the levy a little bit. On years where we pay less, it would decrease the levy a little bit. Annexations, so if the city annexed any town land, we would be allowed to increase our levy by that percentage. It works like net new construction. TIF closures, the city has a few. We have one that's going to close, I think, next year. With a TIF closure, the city is allowed to increase levy by 50% of the increment that, and we'll talk about TIF increment in a minute, but we're allowed 50% of that. The other 50% is used to spread over the value of the city so that it keeps the levy mill rate down for everyone. And then the last way that the levy could be adjusted is if there was a referendum. We had a referendum last year for Western Lake Fire District, and so that did affect the property tax levy. So let's take a look at it. First of all, net new construction. That is determined by the Department of Revenue's Equalization Bureau. They calculate net new construction, and basically what it is the value of any new buildings that go into the city that year, less any demolition or destruction of buildings during the same year. Net new construction amounts for every county and municipality are on the DOR's website, which I have in the handout. And I brought up Waukesha County, just so you could see what it is. The city of Oconomowoc is right here. Our equalized value was $2.8 billion. We brought in $65 million worth of new construction, which when you take this one divided by that one, you get 2.34%. So the city was allowed to increase its levy by 2.34% last year. So how much growth does it take to get that net new construction? What I was going to show you here is, you see there's a lot of places that have less than 1% or 1%. See the Village of Lannon, they had the big number last year, 19%. But their whole value of their city is only 180 million, and they added 35 million. So that's 20% for them. They added 35 million, we added 65 million, but to our city, that's only 2%.
So if there's not enough new construction to even provide for an increase for inflation or cost of living, the municipality can't arbitrarily raise that levy to cover the internal costs of operation and providing the services without that ability to grow.
That's right. So it is a state law that we cannot increase our levy more than that 2.34%. So inflation last year was 6%. So that is, budget is a struggle year after year, and you can see for all of these cities, budget is a struggle because we're up against inflation and increasing service needs that the citizens want. So, like I said earlier, it is a balancing act, and a lot of times we have to go through and see, where can we save money? Where can maybe a service not be the same as it was before, that we could do it a little cheaper? So, okay, 2.34%. And so in order to get net new construction, I put together a little chart. I mean, if it were just houses, to get 2%, we would have to add 161 houses to the city. I think we added 80-some houses last year, but then we had a little bit of a mixture of multifamily and some commercial as well. So a mix of these things is where you get in there, and the city's in between 2 and 3. The last couple of years, I think we had 3. And then it's like, so 2.34%, how much money is that? So that's our next one.
Real
How
quick.
many dollars is that?
So Jason Gallo, the city planner, last year had the intern do a evaluation of our housing mix from single family to multifamily and condo. That report has been put on the city website as of today, actually this afternoon. So anybody watching this video that wants to see what that mix looks like currently, based on that report, can take a look at that under city planning and plans and studies. And you'll see that the residential mix is approximately a 60-40 split. 60% of our housing stock is at single-family residential, 40% is considered multifamily, and out of that 40%, 5% of that is actually classified as condos. So it's a 60, 35, 5 mix. A lot of those condos that have been put up recently, actually over a long period of time, are generally in high visibility areas. which sometimes gives the impression that there's more growth in one of the housing stock sectors than there really is. So I think that's worth talking about as the community continues to grow and see a variation of residential options for new residents and existing residents.
I think most of our single-family growth lately has been out in the northeast part of town where it's all single families. And then when you get closer to downtown or a retail area, you see more condos or multifamily. All right, so what I wanted to talk about was how many dollars, we say 2.34%, so how many dollars is that? So in 2023, our general fund budget is $18 million. Our net new construction is 2.34% and amounts to $250,744. So that is in a very small part of our budget. And basically, we go from 2022 to 2023. We're trying to add a new police officer in there. You know, we've got other expenses, inflationary expenses. So it was a interesting budget meetings. It took a little while. And then this is a graph that shows what our net new construction has been for the last 10 years. So in 2013, we were at less than 1%. We were in the ones for a while. In 19, 20, 21, well, 19 and 20, we were just over 3. And now we're at 2.34. So you can see things fell off a little bit in here, kind of right in the COVID years here in the supply constraint year. So then we get to this calculation quick. So as I said, the things that can increase the levy. First, we start out with the city's base levy. This is 2022 base levy. We get to add $250,744 for net new construction, and then we come up with our new base levy. Of this levy, the council has a policy right now to use about $2.3 million for capital projects. I'm going to talk about capital projects in a few minutes. But we transfer $2.3 million of that and leaves us $8.6 million for general fund operations. Then, addition to that, in 2023, our debt service cost us $185,607 more than the year before. So that added a total of $436,351 was our total levy adjustment allowed for the city. Then last year, the city had a referendum for Western Lakes Fire District. That added $2.2 million to the levy. So our total allowable levy, $15,429,994, okay? So then how does that translate to your tax bill? When we take a look at your tax bill, most people look at the prior year and then the current year and do some comparisons, and the council does that too. They take a look at what is that bill going to look like for people and talk about it. So when we look at 2022, the total levy was $12,755,000. The mill rate was $4.71. The average home paid $1,528.05 in city taxes. The average home value was $324,000. After last year's assessment adjustment, houses went up just over 11%, and it changed our average home value from $324,000 to $360,000. The levy just for the city, we're not talking about the referendum yet, just the city levy, went to $13,191,524. So what happened? Our mill rate went from $471 to $437. So that increase in assessed values and the fact that our levy could only go up that $400 actually decreased the mill rate by 34 cents on the per thousand. So, you know, people look at mill rates, they look at everything else. I usually just look at what do you have to pay, okay? Because last year they paid $1,528. In 2023, just for the city compared in this part, it would be $1,573, or an increase of about $45 for city services. The referendum added $2.2 million onto the levy, and it changed the mill rate from 437 to 511, or an additional 74 cents. The net effect of that is an increase of 40 cents on the mill rate. It went from last year 471 to this year 511. But it increased it quite a bit from just the city-only portion. Now, the other thing that happened is because of the assessment change, the average home 324 to 360, this mill rate only increased 74%. If any of you were around for the referendum education, we talked about that increase being 81 cents. But because the assessments went up, that mill rate went down, and you paid the same $260, and it turned out to be $266 for an average home. So $266 for the referendum, $45 for city services. The total city tax bill went up $312 on an average home. And what I want to show you right now is a tax bill. Oops. Oh, I can't do it. Alt, tab. Okay, city tax bill. I hope I can, if you were sitting in front of the screen, you'd see this. So this is a city tax bill, and whenever you get your city tax bill, it always shows you what you paid in '21 and what you pay in '22, so you can always see the difference.
Year before and current year.
Yep, prior year, yeah. No, it doesn't always show you 21, 22. Yeah, okay, so always shows you the prior year and the current year. So you can see the city of Conwalk, and this is what we were talking about, the 1528 for 21, and then the 1840 for 22. But this is just one part of your bill. All these other taxing jurisdictions have levy to collect as well. Excuse me. While I move this over.
Just notable, the other taxing authorities that the city collects on behalf are independent of the city. The city does not have any authority over what that tax collection is or how they spend it.
That's right.
So the only portion of that that the city is responsible for is the city itself.
Yeah. The city only has control over the city's portion of the levy. But we do collect for everybody. So the city, I don't know how we got so far ahead here, but let me just find this quick. Here we go. This is the slide I was looking for. So what we're going to do is make this bigger again and put it back in viewing mode. And there was the tax bill we looked at. And so of that tax bill, 33% of your tax bill goes to the city. 55% goes to the school district, 10% to the county, and a little 2% to the vocational school. And you can see what their actual levies are that are for City of Oconomowoc taxpayers. So downstairs in the finance office, we collect $46 million, and then we keep the $15 million for city expenses. So of that 33% that belongs to the city allocates it. 71% of those dollars go to general fund operations, 15% to capital projects, that $2.3 million, and 14% go to debt service payments, and that's about $2 million as well. Oh, just over $2 million. So that 71% that goes to general fund operations is allocated to the different services. And that's what we do at the budget meetings. The council, the budgets are submitted and reviewed by the council and the mayor, and policy dictates how the levy dollars are spent. So currently, in this budget, 27% of our budget goes to police, 21% to fire. So a total of 48% of our tax dollars go for public safety. And then 19% to public works, parks, library, administration, as you see.
So real quick, just to reiterate, it's almost like a weather analogy. A feels like and an actual temperature. The actual for the city is about $15 million
Yeah.
to operate a city of around 18,000 people. but it feels like $46 million because that's what actually comes out of the pocket of the taxpayer to various taxing authorities.
For all of the services from all the different taxing jurisdictions, yeah.
Yep.
So that's what I have for taxes. And like I said, our biggest revenue type is property taxes. We talk about that. But we do have a few other revenue types that we use for operations as well. And the city is just opening this new transparency site on our website. We use a service called OpenGov. And starting tomorrow, you'll be able to click into it and look up things if you'd like to as well. But I'm going to show you because the rest of our revenue sources for the operating fund we're going to look at them right on that website. So when you click on the OpenGov transparency site, it's oconomowoc.wi.opengov.com, and it will be on our website tomorrow. And you'll be able to look at this. So this is a transparency site. So this is that same pie chart I was just showing you that shows what all our revenues are, with taxes being the biggest percent. And then one of the, we're basically just looking at where does the city's money come from. So we already talked about taxes. So the next one I want to talk about is intergovernmental aid. So intergovernmental aid for us is really dollars that we get from the state of Wisconsin. So we'll take a look at what funding the city gets from the state, and it'll load up here for you. So we have transportation aid, shared revenue, fire insurance, a couple of other little aids, but these are all really small. The total amount that we get from the state is just over $1.6 million. And 1.1 of that is our transportation aids. Our state transportation aids have remained pretty level throughout the years. We're gaining a little bit here right now, and the reason is because the city is spending more on public safety. So transportation aids are a formula that the state has that takes the dollars that we spend on streets and public safety, and it puts it into their formula and then does a 3-year average. So you can see for the last few years here, we've been spending more money on streets and public safety than we have in the past. It's really we've added 3 police officers in the last 2 years, and we've added several streets in the city as well. Okay, so back to the full graph. One of the ones that we want to talk about, probably Lou wants to talk to you about a little bit, is state shared revenues. So you can see state shared revenues are flat. Now my graphs only go from 2017 to 2023, but this flat graph will go back to 2012. So we haven't gotten more than $250,000 in shared revenue since 2012. Prior to 2012, we were getting about $340,000. And then the state, 2 budget years in a row, cut shared revenues a little bit. So we were at this $250, and we've been there for a long time. So when we look at this, one of the problems that we have is, first of all, we have levy limits, so we're not allowed to increase our levy. State shared revenues remain flat, but inflation rates go up and service costs increase. So our city council, Lou, our mayor, have been working with some of our state legislators and the governor and other mayors to talk to the state a little bit about this. I'll let Lou talk about that.
Well, thank you. And we do have State Representative Barb Dietrich here as well. She is in the middle of the process that the state goes through for their budgeting. The shared revenue has become a large topic of discussion, not just with local municipalities, but counties as well. The process of shared revenue and what it's allocated for and the formula that is associated with it, I believe is a priority for the state legislative body. Our state representative is shaking her head. And it will be going up. The key to all of the revenue sources that Lori is talking about is consistent, reliable sources. So as the formula was anticipated to what it was actually put into place to where it is going now is been a variable that will help alleviate some of the pressures associated with operating the city from both an operational and capital standpoint, to the taxpayer, the property taxpayer specifically. Property taxes aren't and never were supposed to be the sole source of revenue to operate the municipality.
Okay, so other sources, when we go, I probably have to hit the refresh for that. Back to our pie chart. Other sources include payments in lieu of taxes from the utilities. I don't know if people know that or not, but our municipal utilities have to pay taxes to the city just like the private ones do. So they're regulated by the PSC, and so are private utilities like We Energies and some of those. And since they have to pay taxes, then the city utilities pay taxes to the city as well. And that is, we get about $1.6 million from the utilities annually for taxes.
That is part of the benefit of having a public utility that is owned by the city. Other pilot programs within the city include Shorehaven and some of the nonprofit organizations within the city borders.
We have a couple of the larger nonprofits in the city that that do contribute to the city. We they're donations on their part. They're not taxes. They're not required to pay, but because they're good citizens and know that they're also using city services, they do provide a payment to the city that helps pay for the services that they use. Then our next one that I want to look at is licenses and permits. So our biggest license that we have right now, $532,000, comes from sanitary district license fees. So that is for sanitary service that we provide to people that don't live in the city, residents outside of the city. So we have 5 different sanitary districts that run all of their, all of the sanitary sewer runs to our plant. And so the city gets a license fee from them for that. Then our next biggest license and permit
Real quick,
is,
that's because we're an authorized regional plant.
yes. The next biggest license and permit that we get is actually building permits. So I want to take a look at building permits a little bit. This will fluctuate with the amount of building that's in the city. So you can see which years we've had, and last year was really big. Last year, we had a big hailstorm, and I think every house in the city got a new roof. So we won't be getting this much permit revenue again for however long the roof lasts. But yeah, it was really big last year. But when I'm talking about permit revenues and some of these more variable revenues, one of the issues that we have with that is we have to watch where we budget those. Because as you can see, the 2023 budget, we budgeted for $317,000, even though in 21 and 22 and 21 we collected more than that. Other years we haven't, and we have to be conservative with our variable revenues. You don't want to be having ongoing service costs on a revenue that we can't be sure is going to be this high again next year. So we look at trends for these kind and look at what the trends are over the years and then budget conservatively on these kind. Another one that's just like that is interest on investments. There is an up and down line for you. Back in 2019, the city had earned $377,000 in interest revenue. In 2021, $36,000. So this is one of those things where you say, oh, we've got some money here. Maybe we could hire a police officer, but we can't because it's a variable revenue. And as you see, we may or may not get those kind of dollars afterwards. So these ones, it's like, oh, we got a lot of interest revenue this year. Perhaps we could send that to the capital and buy a plow truck, because that's a one-time purchase, and we don't have to worry about what that level of interest revenue will be. We don't have to worry that that level of interest revenue won't cover the salary of a police officer next year.
That interest is derived from reserves, correct?
Yep.
and I know you'll get into that, but if somebody's watching this and they're wondering how the city can get interest on investments, those investments are derived through the city's reserve accounts, and Lori's got a great part of this presentation that'll help you as a taxpayer who helped create those reserves understand why they're there and how they're allocated.
So on this new website, this new web thing that we've got going on here with the transparency, I've gone through most of the revenues that are for operations, and we'll move on to capital. But quick, I just wanted to show you this. When you come here, there's other things I've put out there for you, and I'll add more things. But you can look at, we're looking at revenues up here, but you can look at expenses by department, hopefully. You may have to refresh when you change graphs like that. But, you know, we talked about, you know, how much money we spend on public works or public safety, but then this graph you can filter it in, so instead of just looking at a department, you can look at expense types. So for the whole city, you can see that we spend the most money on wages and benefits. Well, that's because we're a service organization. You know, we don't make widgets or sell donuts. We provide services, which means we have employees that provide services. So it makes sense that wages and benefits is the highest part of our budget. But you can go through here on your own, and you can look at, you know, like when we looked at by department, you can look at by type, you can look at by department, you can look at just public safety. And for those of you that actually like the numbers are down below the graphs. So I hope you have fun with it. If you have, we'll be putting up on a web page some directions for how to use it and how to change the filters and that kind of thing. But if you have questions, you can always send me an email and I'll help you out.
For those who are watching this again, I believe we got open.gov back in 2019.
We've had it for a while, but we haven't really had the staff to put it together.
Yep. As you are looking at this as a taxpayer, understanding where those revenues are, how they're being spent, applies then to the strategic planning of the city. And the budget is really the most important policy document year to year that you want to pay attention to, which is why this is a really important aspect of understanding how your city operates.
Once we get into budget season this summer, you'll see more on here too that has to do with the current budget that we're working on and capital projects, where they're located, how much they cost, all that kind of stuff will be available. So speaking of capital projects, let's move into the next part. I think all these little pie slices light up, but then I decided to use that new website. So the second part of the equation here is really how do we fund our capital needs? And it's not the same. It's $2.3 million in property taxes, but we have to find other sources of revenue for capital as well. So this is a list of all of the capital projects that the city needs to do in 2023. $7.5 million. And as we talked about, the levy portion of that is just under $2.3 million. So other sources of revenue for capital include general obligation debt, other sources that are going to be TIF districts, impact fees, donations, and we're going to just kind of go right through them here. So I think what I was trying to show here is $7 million worth of needs, levy of $2.3 million, and so that leaves us a little bit short. Of that $2.3 million, part of the reason why we have $2.3 million in the levy part for capital is we have costs that come every year. They're reoccurring capital costs, which include street maintenance, because the city puts just over $1 million in the street maintenance program from the levy every year. We have to replace squad cars. We have to pay for fire equipment, our adaptive management program, and a plow truck replacement. We replace one plow truck every year. And that adds up to just over $2 million. $2.3 million across the years, and then the capital needs for general fund dollars are always higher than that. So we take a look at this, and this is just kind of a summary of it all. We work with council here. You know, these are all of the different funds or areas like DPW and parks and everybody that need capital projects. This is what they're gonna buy. So like initiatives for 2023, this is dollars for the boat launch and some other parks. Infrastructure is streets, buildings and grounds, fleet includes the cars and the trucks and the plow trucks and other equipment. So there's the property tax levy. The city has a policy right now that they will issue debt of $1 million per year to add on to the $1 million per year that's in the levy for street maintenance. So we spend just over $2 million a year on street maintenance, and it won't be a couple of months here and we'll be having the street maintenance presentation because, of course, costs are way higher than that.
That portion of street maintenance doesn't include utility infrastructure associated with that. So for example, Thackeray Trail had impact fees, it had some levy spend, and it had a large amount of dollars associated with utilities.
And we
That
had
one
debt
project,
borrowing for that as
yep,
well.
that one project was over $3 million.
Yeah, it was close to $4 million. All right, so going to go through, you know, debt, reserves, we're using ARPA funds, TIF, impact fees, grants. So let's take a look at those different types. First of all, what is GO bonding? General obligation bonds are the debt financing that the city uses when it needs to finance capital projects. The principal and interest is payable from property taxes. It's backed by the city's full faith and credit and ability to levy taxes. So the state of Wisconsin does not restrict the levy for paying the principal and interest payments for the year. So that's why that's an addition to the levy limit. The last bonding that we did was in 2022. We issued for 2022 and 2023 street construction, which was a good idea since interest rates have gone up since then. So we got it at a good time. Speaking of interest rates, one of the things that the city has, just like you do, if you want to go buy a house or buy a car, when you go to the bank, they look at your credit rating, right? And the credit rating that you have helps determine the amount of interest that you have to pay. So the city has the same thing. We get a credit rating from Moody's. Currently, these are the different Moody credit ratings. Currently, the city is all the way up here, AA1. So that is, AAA is the highest you can have. And I think we might have 1 or 2 cities in the state that are AAA. I think Madison is, and I can't remember who the other one is. But we just got updated ours, and it was we were at a AA2. We're now at a AA1, which means we are at the very top of the investment grade, very high in Moody's eyes, in investors' eyes, means we get the best interest rates. Basically, that's what that means. We're now a AA1 along with 12 other municipalities in the whole state. So we're doing really good right there, and that does help us when we borrow to keep our interest rates low. So when we talk about borrowing, and I've been talking about constraints and restrictions, so state law also restricts municipalities borrowing dollars to 5% of its equalized value. Excuse me. Currently, the city's equalized value is just over $3 billion, and so our debt limit is $158 million. As of the end of 2022, our current GO debt, outstanding debt, is $45 million, $45,205,000, or about 29% of our capacity. So when Moody's is looking at us, when credit people are looking at us, say, are you doing good or aren't you? We're under 50% of our debt limit, so the answer is yes, we are doing good. But the other thing I want to talk about, because we already talked about how debt is funded outside of that levy limit calculation, we're allowed to add it in. But of that $45 million of outstanding GO debt that we have right now, only $23 million of it is paid, the principal and interest is paid from the property tax levy. These are general fund capital projects, and right now the outstanding amount is $23,700,000. The rest of it is 4.6 million of utility debt. So that's the water department borrowing money to help with the capital projects while we're doing streets and they're adding new infrastructure inside there. So the principal and interest for that part comes from water utility fees. The other part, the 16 million, almost $17 million of outstanding debt is TIF debt. So these are dollars that were borrowed for the TIF districts that we have, for the public improvements that are going into the TIF districts. But the principal and interest for these are paid only from TIF increment dollars, tax dollars that are paid from the TIF district itself, not part of our property tax levy, not part of everybody else's tax bill. It's paid only from the TIF district. So that is a way that helps the city when we're doing these capital projects and having to borrow, but keeping those costs and dollars off of the regular city property taxes.
Again, notable, and there's some information that is available in regards to TIF. It tends to be a big point of discussion that TIF district, or TID, is identified geographically, and the owner of that property within the TID is the tax source of revenue for paying that back.
Yeah.
So either the developer as it's underway in construction, or the actual property owner that the developer sells it to until that TIF is paid off. So that obligation isn't spread across the entire city. It is really focused only on the area of
That
improvement.
And we're going to talk about TIFs too here. So we get through debt financing here. Another source of funding for capital projects is really fund balance. So currently the city has just over $10 million of fund balance. 4.9 of it is unassigned, but everything else is restricted by the council, okay? So some of it is non-spendable or assigned or restricted or committed, and those are usually outside of the council's control. Those are dollars that we have to keep for various reasons. Non-spendable is usually dollars or assigned dollars. Like if somebody donates a certain amount of dollars for something, we have to hold it for something in particular. We can only spend it on that one thing. It's called restricted or committed. Other dollars that we have assigned, generally they are for one specific thing. So we hold money for developers' trees that we put in the bank and we hang on to it till it's time for those trees to come in. It becomes part of our fund balance, but it would be an assigned fund balance. So the city can't spend that. It's already got a purpose. The unassigned reserve policy, $4.4 million. So the city council has a policy that says we will hold in reserve 25% of our annual expenses in reserve in case of an emergency, okay? So 25% of our annual budget is that $4.4 million that sits there. Another reason why it sits in there is because, I should have talked about this a little bit more when I was looking at revenues, but the city's revenues, they don't come in a nice steady stream. We get a bunch of money at the beginning of the year, and then we don't get any money till August, and then the state revenues don't come in till November. So we pay bills every month. So having that in reserve also helps with cash flow. Keeps us from having to borrow short-term to pay our bills until the rest of our dollars come in. So it's good for us to have the reserve in the bank. It saves us money that way. The unassigned fund balance that we have is the council can decide to spend this on capital projects to help keep us from having to borrow. Basically, when we look at this, and I'll show you the next graph here, the council currently has a plan to spend down $400,000 to $500,000 a year of this to help capital projects, to help pay for capital projects so that we don't have to borrow. It's also good for the city to have this for the unexpected projects that come up. A project that comes up outside of budget time, but it's a good idea for the city, or the city wants to participate in it. We have the ability and the funding to do that. Another thing that we use unassigned, and probably the biggest thing that we use unassigned fund balance for, is to fund projects before, how do you say, the pre-development part. If we're gonna borrow for something, but we have expenses ahead of that, we've got those dollars. We use unassigned fund balance to help us put together parks and some of, I'd say mostly parks and some of the roads that have impact fees associated with them. Because we can pay for that park now and collect the impact fees and pay the fund balance back. So in effect, we're borrowing from ourselves instead of going out and doing a debt issue. We've got the dollars there. We know we're going to get them back. We're going to talk more about impact fees and TIF districts and how it affects our fund balance.
I believe we were also able to use some of the unassigned fund balance to pre-purchase some capital equipment that we knew was going to have an extended lead time. That is a huge benefit and asset to the community when you run into those unexpecteds over the last 3 years, where you have a vehicle that you may have been able to get with a 12-month lead time normally, and that turned into a 36 or 48-month lead time. We were able to proactively position the city to maintain a high level of service based on the equipment availability because of the unassigned fund balance.
Right, so that we could actually put contracts out there for equipment that we're gonna get not until 2025 because of the lead times. So that helps us out a lot because we'll fund it in the regular way when that day gets here. But right now, if we don't buy it now, we're not, it's too many months in the future. So that has helped us out tremendously. And that's why we say, fund balance is for the unexpected. And honestly, the economy in the last couple of years has been unexpected. So let's move on. I wanted to show you the plan to use, I said this already, the council has planned to use $400,000 to $500,000 a year towards those capital projects because remember, the levy amount wasn't enough. So we'll add some fund balance amount and help us get caught up, make sure that we have the equipment that we need to provide the services. Impact fees, we talked about just a little bit, but an impact fee is typically a one-time payment imposed on a developer of a new project. So they're building new houses. Those houses are gonna need services, right? And we take a look at, we do a study. We have an impact fee study for parks, law enforcement, and transportation. And what they do is they look out 15 years, 20 years, and they say, this is the expected population during those times. And if our population grows, how many new parks are we gonna need? How many new streets are we gonna need? And the law enforcement is actually for the facility. We can't use it for police officers, but we did use it for the new public safety building. So basically what happens then is we come up with a formula and a fee. So if you're gonna build a new house in the city, you have to pay the impact fees that helps us build those new parks and new streets. Impact fees have to be spent within 8 years of when they're collected, but due to the city having a fund balance, we're able to get those projects started. We're able to get them started right away. We do the Northeast Region Park. They're building houses out there every day. So we're able to get that park going and then collect those impact fees back and put that back into the city's fund balance. So that's worked out well. Another, and I say another, but this is really a big part of our capital projects. Public-private partnerships. When you take a look at that $7 million, and we looked at that before, the whole public-private partnership portion was $3 million of that. And what that is the partnerships that we have through TIF districts, through donations, and through grants. So take a look, first of all, at TIF districts, because that's always a topic and people don't know a lot about, but they hear about it a lot, right? So TIF, tax increment financing. It's a tool that we use to promote orderly growth and development of the community. So TIF is used to help stimulate development or redevelopment. Take Olympia Fields, for example, because that was vacant land that had been sitting there deteriorating for quite a while and kind of just making a blemish area on the city right there. So with the developer and the city working together, we can get that area redeveloped and put public infrastructure in there that citizens want so that they have access to the area, so that they can use the area without putting those costs on the tax roll. This all paid through the district itself, and I'll show you how that works. So if you look at this graph right here, the bottom right here is when a TIF district starts, and this is the assessed value of this area on the day the TIF district starts, and we call that base value. So the base value of the TIF district, and I'm going to say, let's just say it's $1 million, okay? So the city, the county, the tech college, and the school district are right now collecting taxes on $1 million of value the day the TIF starts. So all of these taxing entities will continue to collect taxes on that $1 million of value the whole time, the whole life of the TIF district. We're still going to get the same money, doesn't take it away from anybody. But what we know is that if we participate in this TIF district, we are going to be able to help direct that development. It's going to be a development that is something that the city wants. It's going to be able to be built the way that it's proposed to the city. So in order to do that, we participate, and while the TIF district starts to develop, while they start to build buildings in there, and they're adding value, this is during the life of the district, the value keeps growing. So they're putting in all of these buildings and houses and commercial areas, and it's building the tax value. They still pay taxes. The amount of taxes that they pay is this whole gray area here. And all of the taxes that they pay are used to pay for the TIF district, for those public improvements, that debt service, so that it doesn't go on the tax levy. Once all the projects are complete and the TIF ends, then all of this from 1 million to say 235 million now goes on the tax levy for all of the taxing jurisdictions. So instead of getting taxes on $1 million, where the city would get $5,100 if it were $1 million, now the city, after this is finished, will get taxes on $235 million or $1.1 million in taxes instead of $5,000. And that's really why we do it. We get orderly growth, we get amenities that the public wants, and it doesn't go on the tax bill. And once we're done with that project, it increases the value and the spread of taxes over the whole city.
And there is a but-for test that is required in order for it to pertain to TIF. So the way the project is proposed has to require that TIF dollar and a but-for evaluation. So but for that TIF, this project won't be delivered in the way that the community and that public-private partnership desires it to be. So it's not necessary, it's not free money. It is structured money that is provided to incentivize specific development.
Right. So I'm going to take a look at the TIF districts that we have currently. TIF district number 5 is over by City Beach, the Eagles Landing Park on Lac La Belle. Condo units were built there. But besides the condo units, what happened is the city, we had dollars to help facade improvements downtown. We had parking and water access improvements built with TIF dollars, streetscaping, pedestrian amenities. So if you look at this area, you can now walk you can walk over by the Veterans Park, and you can walk on a path all the way to City Beach, because we had a partnership with these owners, and that is now public property instead of private property. So it gives everyone access to the lake, where before it was just private and you wouldn't be able to walk along there. So that's something that happened. And then we also have dollars in there to redo the city boat launch. So those are all amenities that are paid for through the TIF district that don't go on the tax levy, or helps us. Those are capital projects that the city would do. And that way, it stays off the tax levy and is paid through TIF dollars. TIF 6 is Fowler Lake Village right across the street here. And with dollars from that TIF district, the city was able to do the Lakeside Boardwalk on the seating amenities. We have dollars in there to improve parking. The street improvements to Pleasant Street and St. Paul were done with these TIF dollars. So when we're talking about doing a street, and you just heard Lou talking about, $2 or $3 million to redo a street like that, these streets that got improved didn't have to go on the tax levy. They were paid through the increment from that building over there being built. And then TIF 7, which we already talked about, Olympia. So that's a redevelopment of that vacant resort. Street access, traffic lights, roundabout, a vibrant commercial center is what's happening at Olympia, and there's a lot more to come out there. The next, and really a big part of what gets built in parks around here comes from donations and grants. We talk about that Rockwell Park acquisition. The citizens donated $1.3 million to buy that park. Skate park was paid with donations. Pickleball park, 100% donations to build that. Splash pads coming, Imagination Station, Peacock Dam, Oz Plaza, all of these great things around the city have come from partnerships with donations and grants, with the city either providing the land, some dollars, being a partner in here, doing the planning, helping with the planning. It's been it's been really good for the city, especially over the last several years. And Lou maybe wants to talk more about donations and grants?
Well, you've provided some great highlight examples of those efforts. Some of the additional efforts would include the K-9 unit, the body cams, and some other capital expenditures associated with public safety that wouldn't have been able to be put in place or be put in place in a timely fashion to help keep our community at the highest level possible of a quality of life, and being able to walk the streets with your family anytime, anywhere, and feel safe and secure.
Thanks. So public-private partnerships really do save tax dollars. The use of TIF to pay for public benefits means those costs stay off the tax roll. Grants help offset the full cost of a project. Usually we have a little bit of matching money that goes in there, but a lot of times a grant will pay 50 or 70% of a project. So that helps us out a lot. And donations, the participation of the citizens in those amenities that are important to them in the city have really brought some nice amenities to the city. So as I said, it's a balancing act. We have many different types of revenues that all come with their own constraints and rules. We've gone through the major ones of those today, but the council works during budget time with the city administrator and the mayor and me and the department heads, and we work really hard to balance all of that and bring together a budget that gives the residents the services they want at the most affordable price that we can provide. I have some links in the handout for you here. Now this handout that I've got, I will put up on the website as well. So you can use the links, you'll be able to click on them. And I guess that's everything I've got, Lou.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know you're probably just finishing up your popcorn and your soda if you're watching at home. There's also a TIF packet that was made available in paper format here. Maybe we can share a link to that as well. There's lots of information on the city site. It's a great thing, and sometimes that's a challenge because you don't know necessarily where to find it. But one thing I will tell you is that